Hello my friends, in this video we will be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and G25 results of a medieval European Jew from Erfurt in Germany. This is actually one of the samples used as a reference for medieval European Jews from Erfurt in illustrative DNA. The sample is I13870. It is this sample right here. It is, as you can see, one of the references used for the medieval European Jew Erfurt in illustrative DNA. So this is one of the samples used as a reference here. Now, what I did is I went to European Nucleotide Archive and I downloaded this sample in FASTQ format. Then I did some conversions and I translated it into microarray sequence format. And I am going to present to you this sample and its DNA results. I ran it through my tool, which is Trait Predictor. It is a tool I developed myself. By the way, the link to buy my Trait Predictor will be in the description of this video. It is essentially a tool that generates a DNA report with a complete health and traits breakdown for a microarray sequence file. So if you have MyHeritage, 23andMe, or Ancestry DNA file, you can run it through my Trait Predictor and you will get a DNA report for your raw DNA file. So make sure you check out the description of this video, in which will be the link to buy my Trait Predictor. It is currently $25 on each, but there will be a sale. Very soon I'm going to release a new version of it with a sale. It's going to be $20, and I think the sale is going to be effective for about maybe a week, and then it's going to go up to $25 once again. So now that the promotion is done, let me introduce to you this sample. This sample is a male. His paternal lineage, it looks like it's J, although it is predicted to be F because he is not scoring anything for IJ. It looks like 0 variants found for IJ in total. So there is some. It's kind of a low coverage sample, so it doesn't have enough data. There is not enough relevant data to truly determine the haplogroup, unfortunately. But we can very correctly guess it to have a J haplogroup because 18 out of 18 variants for J. That's very telling. And most likely his paternal lineage is actually J2A because 2 out of 2 variants for J2A. Most likely the paternal lineage in this case is J2A. Very common paternal lineage for Ashkenazi Jews. And this is 100% a male in terms of the gender. For his mitochondrial lineage is most likely K1A1. Looks like the most precise subclade is K1A1B1A. Very, very interesting. Now, if you look at medieval European Jews from Erfurt on illustrative DNA, you can see that they're most similar to various Ashkenazi Jews from Poland, Ukraine, Russia, Lithuania, Belarus, Germany. But after Ashkenazi Jews, so of course Ashkenazi Jews are most similar to various other Ashkenazi Jews, and Erfurt is located in Germany. So these would be Ashkenazi Jews. They are European Jews. They are Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi refers to Jews from Europe. So these would be Ashkenazi Jews, right? So they're most similar to other European or Ashkenazi Jews, but following those Ashkenazi Jews are Sicilians, Maltese, and West Sicilians. So the populations most similar to these Erfurt Jews after other Ashkenazi Jews are populations of East Mediterranean, such as Sicilians and Maltese, which is very revealing because these populations, such as Sicilians and Maltese, actually have a similar origin story to Ashkenazi Jews. They're also a mixture of populations of the Middle East with populations of Southern Europe, which is kind of similar to the origin story of Ashkenazi Jews, who are also a mixture of populations of the Middle East with populations of Southern Europe. Hence why they show up sort of similar with G25 to Sicilians and Maltese. Now, in terms of this sample specifically, this sample is closest, and I removed all Ashkenazi Jews from the references here, so you can see they're scoring closest to Greeks and Cypriots. That is because I removed all Ashkenazi Jews, and actually I removed Sephardic Jews as well, because Sephardic Jews are very similar to Ashkenazim in terms of their autosomal DNA. So I removed Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews from the references here. And they are most similar to Greeks, Dodecanese Greeks, and Cypriots with G25. Which is not surprising. That is very typical and very common for Ashkenazi Jews to score like this. And for the three-way breakdown, you can see that the three-way breakdown for this individual looks like this. They're scoring 40% Druzia, which would be representing the Middle Eastern or Israelite, you could say, component in this Ashkenazi individual. then 36% Greek from Crete, then 24.2% Maltese. This would represent the European or Southern European component that is also present in Ashkenazim. Now, some people say that Ashkenazim have a Northern European genetic component as well, and we could probably find some Northern European genetic component if we limit it to, say, 5 populations. And to remove some inaccuracies, let's try to put this column to 0.5. Let's see what we get here. No, we don't get any Northern Europeans. Actually, let's try to remove this column. Let's try to get rid of that. Maybe we will get some Northern Europeans now. No, we do not get any Northern Europeans. So it looks like for this individual specifically, this individual does not actually have any Northern European ancestry whatsoever. They're scoring 35.2% Druzia, 27.6% Albanian, 23. So what is the Middle Eastern component here? The Middle Eastern component is the 35% Druzia and 10.8% Samaritan. If you add the 35.2% Druzia plus 10.8 Samaritan, that together would be 40. I think that would be 47% together. Right? 47? No, 46% together. So this individual has 46% of Israelite DNA, and the rest is Southern European, which is very typical for Ashkenazi Jews, especially, right? From, if we consider the time period, this individual lived in the 12th to 14th century. This is before they mixed with a lot of the Northern Europeans. So I guess it makes sense for this individual to not have any Northern European ancestry. I'm a little bit surprised by that, because from what I know about Ashkenazi Jews, they are also supposed to have a little bit of Northern European ancestry. But it looks like this individual actually doesn't have any. Looks like this person is just Middle Eastern and Southern European. Very interesting. But now we're going to get into his results with Shade Predictor, and you're going to be very surprised because he does not look Middle Eastern or Southern European whatsoever. So we're going to start with pigmentation. So one thing we're going to notice when we talk about pigmentation is that he actually has blue eyes, or blue eyes with a neighbor center ring, which is very unusual or atypical for somebody of Middle Eastern ancestry. There is 30.7% odds for blue eyes and 37% odds for blue eyes with a neighbor center ring, 2% odds for brown eyes, and 0.07% odds for dark brown eyes. So he definitely doesn't have brown eyes. There is pretty significant odds for hazel eyes. To be fair, 16.6% odds for hazel eyes is quite significant, but still, most likely this individual has blue eyes or blue eyes with a neighbor center, which is really surprising because his ancestry does not have any. There is no Northern European in his ancestry whatsoever. But I guess it is also possible for people of Southern European and Middle Eastern ancestry to have these types of traits. So maybe it's not so surprising. For hair color, it looks like he has light brown hair. Actually, the second largest group he scores after light brown hair is dark blonde hair at 28% likelihood. So there is 40.5% likelihood of light brown hair, then 28% likelihood of dark blonde hair, then 17.9% likelihood of dark brown hair, and he definitely doesn't have black hair. There is 2.8% odds for black hair, and there's actually 9.2% odds for light blonde hair, which is absolutely crazy. So this person is very light, very, very light for somebody from... When you consider his ancestry being Southern European and Middle Eastern, this person is very, very light in color. For skin color, he's scoring white or palest skin, 75% odds for white skin, and 22.4% odds for palest skin. For hair texture, he is scoring straight, wavy, or curly hair. There is 6% odds for kinky hair, but I think that's because the file is not very high quality. If the file was higher quality, he'd be scoring much less. But he is scoring mostly... The highest group he scores is wavy hair. And for nose shape, he is scoring mostly Greek shaped nose. So most likely he's got a rather long and aquiline and narrow nose shape. So let's look at the coloring related variants found in the file and try to figure out why is he so light. So first, he's got 2 light color variants here. So we can already expect sort of a blue eye prediction with snipper 3. He's got heterozygous genotype for blue eye haplotype 3, which is really surprising because it's so uncommon for populations of the Middle East or Southern Europe to have light color variants here. This is just so unusual. It's very Northern European to have light color variants in BH3. He has blue eye haplotype 2. He does not have blue eye haplotype 4. So, unfortunately, the genotypes for this variation and this variation right here are missing, and they are very important. Having genotypes here and here are very, very important. Now, this genotype right here is actually very revealing because this variation is located right next to this one, and they're linked very closely to each other. They're in a very close linkage, so you can actually predict the genotype here from the genotype here, and it's looking like he most likely has 2 light color variance in this variation as well, most likely. But however, some tools such as YSEC, for example, YSEC phenotype predictor does not do imputation. So YSEC phenotype predictor would not be able to predict an eye color for this individual. Snipper 3 would be able to. So with Snipper 3, we're going to see blue. But with YSEC, we would not see a eye color for this sample. So, and he has 2 light color variants here. So yeah, we're going to see blue with Snipper 3. But with YSEC, we're not going to see a predicted eye color because YSEC cannot do imputation. Let's see what he scores with Snipper 3. Hold on. Let's check it. Let's check it out right now. Yes, and as I said, with Snipper 3, he scores blue eyes. So that is to be expected, but with YSEC, you would not see a predicted eye color because YSEC, as I said previously, is not capable of doing imputation. Let's look at Phenotype Oracle. And the closest phenotypes to this individual looks like this. This is actually quite a Jewish phenotype. Jewish is one of the populations that comes to mind when I see this phenotype. This is also, in my opinion, quite a Jewish phenotype, especially the woman. Not so much the man, but the woman is very Jewish looking, in my opinion. The man looks more, I would say, English or maybe Irish or something, but the woman looks very Jewish, I think. And then there's this phenotype, which I don't think looks Jewish at all, but looks kind of, I don't know. I don't even know. So these are the closest phenotypes to this individual. They all kind of look very similar to each other, except for this one. This one is an outlier out of these three. But these two do look similar to each other. There's strong similarities between this phenotype and this phenotype. Now, for the mixtures of phenotypes, the closest mixture is a mixture of 50% NAT plus 50% NAT. The second closest mixture is a mixture of 50% NAT plus 50% NAT. I guess in case you aren't figuring out what the difference between these two mixtures is, the difference is that in this mixture, the bottom has darker eye color and hair color. The third mixture is 50% NAT plus 50% NIS. The fourth mixture is 50% NAT plus 50% NIS. And the fifth is 50% NAT. So it's more or less pretty much the same thing. They all kind of look very similar. Now, the only difference is that this phenotype on the bottom, I guess I could say like this Jewish or maybe let's give it a name. Let's call it Edgar. This Edgar phenotype right here looks kind of different from these two, because these two are very sharp and very like I'd say they're very Eastern European looking. I would say, kind of like, let's call them Vlad. So this phenotype and this phenotype, let's call them Vladimir. And this phenotype, let's call it Edgar. So Edgar looks more like a potato, right? It's got more a round nose shape. It's got more rounder facial features, right? And smaller nose, rounder nose shape. So same for the woman. You can see the woman has a wider nose bridge, smaller and rounder nose, rounder face. They're a little bit higher body fat as well. But Vladimir over here, these two Vladimirs, they're looking pretty similar. They both have very sharp noses, very sharp facial features, big eyes, and overall these Vladimir phenotypes are very similar to each other. The only difference is the top Vladimir is a little bit lighter than the bottom. But Edgar is a little bit softer. Edgar is more of a potato. But then Edgar has dark eyebrows, which I think makes it look a little bit more southern. Edgar has dark, thick eyebrows, which makes it look more Jewish to me. Whereas Vladimir has thin and sort of sparse, especially this top Vladimir right here has sort of thin, sparse eyebrows, which also you have to take into account. You have to take that into consideration. So this is what the admixtures look like. All right, let's look at the biomarks panel. By the way, maybe I should look at the ethnic calculator panel. I usually skip over that part in my videos, but in this case, it looks like the closest populations with my ethnic calculator here are Azerbaijan Neolithic, Turk, corded ware, New Grange Neolithic farmer, Pinarbasi hunter-gatherer from Anatolia, Belbeaker from Britain, global amphora. You can pause. You can let me zoom in. Hold on. Yeah, so I'm gonna zoom in, and if you guys want to look at this, So you can see the S&P count is 197, quite low. But if you want to look at this and you want to really examine this, you can like pause and look at the screen. But I'm not gonna go over this too much. I don't think it's too important. Let's look at the biomarkers panel. I think I should go back to the original zoom level. All right, so it looks like he's got a above average level of vitamin D, which is really good to see. He's got a below average level of LDL cholesterol, which is really good. A below average level of HDL cholesterol, which is kind of bad because HDL cholesterol is the good kind. You want to have more of it. And he's got above average level of glucose, which is okay. Above average level of hemoglobin, which is okay. Below average level of blood pressure, which is good actually. Spot on average level of iron in the blood. So it looks like nothing was found for level of iron in the blood. He's got slightly above average level of sex hormone binding globulin, slightly below average level of red blood cell count in blood. Nothing was found for telomere length, so we don't know what kind of life expectancy to suggest for this individual. This sample is quite low quality, low coverage. We can't really talk much about health-wise because this sample is not very high quality. For expected height, he's predicted to be slightly above average in height, slightly taller than average. Really cool. Not much taller, like 0.3 centimeters taller. That's what 3.5 millimeters taller than average. All right, let's look at the polygenic risk scores. We are going to ignore everything that is close to 1 and only look at the results that are very distant from 1. So it looks like he's got significantly above average odds for arrhythmia nodosum, below average odds for hemoglobin E disease, higher than no, S&P count is 0, but he's got higher than average odds for lupus. What this tells me is that he's got a bad score for the HLA gene panel. That's what this tells me, because this is calculated with the HLA gene panel in mind. So this is actually pretty revealing. So we can also expect a high score for multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and there's another condition that uses the HLA gene panel for the score. Higher than average odds for gout. He's got a slightly below average odds for polycystic ovary syndrome, which is good, but he's not a female, so it's not very relevant. Slightly below average odds for AMD, which is really good. Slightly above average odds for rheumatoid arthritis, which is really good. Slightly below average odds for epilepsy, which is also really good. Slightly above average odds for asthma, which is also really good. We can skip over all that. Slightly above average odds for primary biliary cirrhosis, which is unfortunate. Slightly above averages for male pattern hair loss, which is unfortunate, but that is typical for. Actually, that's kind of low considering his ancestry, him being a West Eurasian and actually a Jew. You know, Jewish people. I don't want to be racist and stuff, but Jewish people are stereotyped as hitting the Norwood Reaper at a very early age. Like Jewish men are stereotyped as going bald very early, and his score here 1.17 is actually very low for somebody of not only West Eurasian but of Jewish ancestry. So it's very interesting. He's actually quite protected from male pattern hair loss, I would say, based on his score here. That's very low, I think. That's very low. Slightly above average odds for atrial fibrillation. Okay. Nothing was found for deep vein thrombosis, really good to see. Slightly below average odds for cardiovascular issues, which is really good to see. Slightly a bit above averages for unipolar depression, slightly above averages for bipolar type 1, slightly above averages for schizophrenia, and then he's got a slightly below averages for type 2 diabetes and slightly above averages for type 1 diabetes. So I was expecting the score for type 1 diabetes to be kind of high because it's influenced by the HLA gene panel. And the reason I know it would be kind of high is because the lupus panel, the lupus score was kind of high, and there is 0 S&Ps for that. So I knew it's the score, the basic score for the HLA gene panel being shown. He's got below averages for Alzheimer's, and he's got surprisingly slightly below averages for multiple sclerosis. That's very interesting. So we're gonna have to look at the HLA gene panel in a little bit of maybe a couple seconds. We're gonna look at that. He's got 0 risk for breast cancer out of 6, which is really good to see. He's got below averages for prostate cancer, really good to see, but that's only 1 S&P. Not much information here. 6 risk variance for testicular cancer out of 8, and he's got risk variance in all the important variations of KITL G. So he's quite cooked when it comes to testicular cancer risk variance and KITL G. But the important thing to mention here is that most West Eurasians and Europeans and Middle Eastern people and people of North African ancestry in general score the same thing here. It is very, very common. These risk variants in KLG are very, very common for people of West Eurasian ancestry. So it's not like he has these rare risk variants that predispose him to testicular cancer that most people in West Eurasia don't have. No, he has the same exact risk variants that you and I and the rest of us have that are very common for West Eurasians. So it's not that concerning. It's not that big of a deal. It's more like not having these risk variants is protective against testicular cancer rather than having them. I mean, I guess you could view it either way. You could view it as having these risk variants predisposes you to testicular cancer risk, or you could view it as not having them protects you in a way. It depends on how you look at it. But really, most West Eurasians have the same genotype here, right, as this individual. Most West Eurasians have the same type of risk genotype, so it's not that big of a deal, to be honest. And most West Eurasians don't go on in their life developing testicular cancer. He's got 4 risk variants, 4 celiac disease out of 6, which is really high. Very interesting. So he's definitely got some predisposition to celiac disease. Let's see. Do we find anything else? He's got 4 risk variants for Crohn's disease, but none of them are marked as important, so we can disregard that. No risk variants for Parkinson's. He's got 3 risk variants for Gilbert's syndrome, but they're both marked as common, so that's no big deal. No risk variants for basal cell carcinoma. No risk variants for porphyria, Peutz-Jeghers, of hypopastasia, and 2 risk variants for allergies right here, but they're common. No risk variants for anything else, and we are not finding any risk variants for anything else. So it's pretty good. Do we find anything that's concerning besides the genotype for KTLG that leads to testicular cancer? I don't really find anything that's concerning in this result, to be honest. We do want to look at the HLA gene panel, though. Aside from that, I think aside from the HLA gene panel, I don't see anything that's concerning in this result. Let's look at the HLA gene panel in a couple seconds. So, first for the Warrior versus Warrior panel, he's definitely predisposed to Warrior phenotype, very European phenotype to have. So, but this is only based on 4 SNPs. And what's interesting is he's scoring Warrior despite having GG in Combs maturation, which really goes a long way to say that you need to examine every genotype in the COMT and MAOA and MAOB region to really get a good look and good idea of what your predisposition is to Warrior versus Warrior phenotype, because just looking at one variation is not going to give you a good idea of what your predispositions are. Because if you just look at this one variation in Combs Met and you see that you have a GG genotype, you'd think, oh, I'm a Warrior. But no, not really, because you got to look at the whole area. You got to look at COMT, you got to look at MAOA, you got to look at MAOB. And in this case, this individual actually only has 4 relevant variations, but even from these 4, she is scoring higher for Warrior than she is for Warrior, despite having GG in Combs Met. Really interesting. And the biggest contribution to that was this genotype right here, TT in MAOA's RS6323. This was the biggest contribution to him scoring Warrior 38%. For DRD2, he is scoring higher number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. This also kind of contributed to the high score for schizophrenia and bipolar. Not really high, but like sort of high-ish score for schizophrenia and bipolar. He scored 1.2 times the average odds. I'd say it's not super high, but it's kind of slightly high. And it is based on just one SNP right here. DRD2's 20 RS25 14 to 18, which leads to slightly higher odds of schizophrenia, and it leads to also scoring slightly higher number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. None of the other SNPs here that follow play a role in this panel, because this panel is only for DRD2. You see the sample isn't very high quality. There's not that many SNPs that go into these results. For 5-HTN serotonin, he's scoring higher or intermediate levels of 5-HTN serotonin, so that's very interesting. And actually, we do not see long form 5-HTLPR here. So he's scoring higher levels of 5-HTN serotonin without having long form 5-HTLPR, which is very rare, very interesting. Kind of unexpected. So he is a little bit protected from such conditions as anxiety and depression. For autism, he is scoring higher odds of autism at 52.9%, definitely very much predisposed to higher odds of autism. And for lactose persistence, he's scoring lower odds of lactose intolerance, definitely very much predisposed to being lactose persistent. Very interesting. It looks like he has 2 variants for European lactose persistence in this variation of MCM6, and he also has 2 variants for European lactose persistence in this variation of MCM6. So he's definitely lactose persistent. He's got both the in both the variations for European lactose persistence, he's got 2 derived variants in both. So that's very interesting because it's a very Northern European mutation to have. And he, despite not being a Northern European whatsoever, has got both in both variations, both alleles in both variations. This sample is very surprising. I mean, it's not expected to see that. You don't expect to see this type of genotype, and especially you don't expect to see the coloring. You don't expect to see this type of coloring, blue eyes and blonde or light brown hair in an individual who is closest to Dodecanese Greeks and Cypriots. Just really, really unusual. For empathy, he is scoring lower or average level of empathy. Actually, scoring lower level of empathy at 55% based on these 2 SNPs. So he's maybe a little bit predisposed to being more of a sociopath. Okay, we're going to skip that. For multiple sclerosis, he does not have any risk variance for multiple sclerosis in the HLA gene. So it looks like for the HLA gene panel, we might be looking at some really good results. But I am expecting the HLA gene panel to be a little bit bad because of what we saw for the lupus panel on polygenic risk scores page. For the cardiovascular disease panel, he is scoring lower odds of cardiovascular issues. Really good to see. Okay, for the facial morphology panel, European genotype and EDAR and genotype for slightly shorter midface length. For miscellaneous panel, no micropenis, really good to see. And likely does not have 40x sneeze reflex. No variance for increased pain sensitivity, really good to see. Okay. Risk score for alcoholism is slightly below average, really good to see. Okay. For rare diseases and traits panel, let's look at that. Looks like he's got common genotype that leads to higher risk for certain autoimmune diseases. He's got a genotype for decreased risk of rheumatoid arthritis. Looks like he doesn't really carry any risk variants for any rare conditions. He's got 2 risk variants in both the variations for celiac disease that are not HLA, but the most important risk variants for celiac disease are in the HLA gene, where he does not have any risk variants, so that's really good. Canavan syndrome, nothing was found. Crohn's disease, nothing was found. Nose 3, we can ignore that. For HIV and AIDS panel, he's got 2 protective variants in HLA-C here, which leads to a 90% reduction in HIV viral load. So it looks like he does have the protective variants in HLA-C, which leads to a significant reduction in HIV viral load. So he's quite protected from HIV. Really good to see. Really good to see that. And for the HLA gene panel, we do see very high odds for highest odds for autoimmune disease and intermediate odds for autoimmune disorder. So let's look at the HLA genotypes and see what contributed to this result. So this is kind of unfortunate. So this did contribute in a bad way to the result. This is really good. This contributed in a good way to the result. This is also really good. This also contributed to the result in a very good way. This right here contributed to the result in a bad way. It's kind of a mix. There's some genotypes that contribute to the result in a good way. Some genotypes that contribute to the result in a bad way. Like this definitely in a bad way. This definitely in a bad way. This in a bad way. But some of this other stuff contributed in a good way. There's more positives here than negatives. So overall, the highest things he scores is lower odds of autoimmune disease still. Nonetheless, it's more the predisposition overall is still positive. For MTRR gene panel, looks like there's no risk variance for spina bifida and disorders in intracellular colon metabolism. And for CBS gene panel, for homocysteine level panel, looks like the predisposition is to elevated or lower levels of homocysteine. So when you take that into consideration, the homocysteine level panel and the cardiovascular panel, when you take them both into consideration, in both of them, the result was really positive. Homocysteine panel, he's scoring lower homocysteine levels. For the cardiovascular panel, he's scoring lower odds for cardiovascular issues. And because of that, overall, his risk of cardiovascular issues is probably quite low. That's really good to see. For muscular dystrophy, no risk variance for ADL, really good to see. Color blindness panel, no risk variance for anything here. Obesity, FCO gene panel, looks like lower or intermediate odds of obesity based on 1, 2 SNPs. Nothing was found for syncope, and looks like no alleles for reduced odds of cleft palate. And for blood group panel, looks like his blood type is most likely type O. The most common blood type in the world is type O, and that seems to be the blood type of this Ashkenazi Jew from Erfurt. Well, this was certainly a very fun video for me to record. Do you want to see more Ashkenazi Jews from Erfurt? I can certainly make more videos about this very fascinating subgroup of humans. Make sure you check out the description of the video where you can get the raw DNA sample of this human that I analyzed in this video. And make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.